The janitor moved silently through the gleaming halls of the corporate spire, his mop trailing faint reflections across the polished floor of the morning. Sun streamed through the massive glass walls and caught on the floating holographic displays, making them shimmer like distant stars. He had cleaned these halls for years, yet today, something felt different, a tension in the air that made the machines hum louder, and the footsteps of executives, sharper and quicker above him in the towering atrium. The alien billionaire prepared his contract, a document that glowed with complex alien symbols, interwoven with numbers and clauses that shifted as though alive. The deal promised fortunes and power across multiple star systems, yet hidden within the text were traps, mistakes that could destroy planets and ruin countless lives. The janitor paused for a moment, listening to the whispered conversations around him, executives murmuring about profits, growth, and conquest, unaware that the fate of billions rested on the edge of a signature. Cold chill ran down the janitor's spine as he realized the danger. The contract was not merely a business transaction. It was a ticking time bomb, and no one in the room noticed, not the alien billionaire, whose eyes glimmered with ambition and pride, nor the human executives. Scrambling to impress their master, they saw only opportunity. The janitor saw consequences, and the weight of knowledge pressed down on him. Like gravity, he gripped the handle of his mop tighter, his knuckles white. He stepped closer to the edge of the atrium, trying to make his presence known, yet fearing no one would listen, until finally a surge of courage forced him to shout across the room, "Never sign that contract." The words echoed through the hall and bounced off the towering walls, startling everyone. The alien billionaire froze mid-gesture, his luminous eyes widening in shock and disbelief. The executives blinked and murmured questions, but none dared move. Forward silence fell over the room like a physical force. The humming of machines ceased for a heartbeat. The janitor felt the eyes of hundreds upon him. The ordinary man had become the center of attention, and he realized that the stakes were higher than he had imagined. The alien billionaire leaned forward in his seat, as if trying to peer into the human mind, attempting to understand how someone so seemingly insignificant could see the danger that had escaped the most brilliant minds in the galaxy. The janitor pointed at the contract glowing before the billionaire, his voice steady now despite the pounding of his heart. The clauses that would enslave colonies, bankrupt entire civilizations, lay hidden in plain sight, yet the janitor had seen them, and he refused to let them go unnoticed. He repeated the warning louder, this time with urgency and authority. "Never sign that contract." The words rang like a bell across the hall, and set the stage for a confrontation that no one in the room would ever forget. Executives whispered, frantically calculating risks and possibilities. The alien billionaire sat frozen, a rare moment of hesitation crossing his proud features as the janitor stood firm in the center of the atrium, the ordinary against the extraordinary, the unseen against the powerful, and the fate of star systems balanced on a single warning from the simplest of voices. The alien billionaire sat frozen in his massive chair, his glowing eyes fixed on the janitor, as if trying to calculate the impossible. The room hummed with anticipation, machines flickered, and executives leaned forward, uncertain whether to challenge the human or retreat into silence. The janitor took a deep breath, his heart hammering, but his voice firm, his mind racing through every clause, every hidden trap he had uncovered in the contract, and he repeated again, "Never sign that contract." Whispers rippled through the room. Some of the humans dared to glance at each other, their mouths opening and closing without sound as they struggled to reconcile the audacity of the janitor with the gravity of the warning. Some executives tried to point out flaws in his logic, yet none could contradict the evidence in front of them. The holographic contract pulsed with alien symbols, the very language shifting as though it knew that deception had been exposed, and even the alien billionaire could not ignore the flaw he had overlooked. The janitor stepped closer, weaving between the hovering displays, his mop trailing faint lines of light on the floor like a sword guiding him forward. His voice rose, carrying over the chatter, and hum louder than the machines, louder than the whispered calculations. "Never sign that contract," he shouted, each word imbued with urgency, clarity, and the weight of 10 billion lives unknowingly at stake. The alien billionaire leaned back, his fingers frozen over the glowing signature plate, his pride warring with doubt as the room seemed to hold its breath. Executives shuffled papers and whispered in alien tongues. Some glanced nervously at their boss, wondering if even he could be swayed by a mere human. Yet the janitor had never felt more powerful, more alive, as he realized that despite his position, he held the balance of destiny in his hands. One wrong move and billions would suffer, yet one warning could prevent catastrophe. If the billionaire, listen, the alien billionaire finally broke the silence. His glowing eyes, narrowing, the words he spoke were deliberate, slow, as he asked the janitor to repeat what he had said and why. The human explained calmly, yet urgently, outlining every hidden clause, the ramifications for planetary systems and interstellar economies. The consequences of signing it, not as profit or loss but as life and death. His words painted pictures of ruined colonies, enslaved populations and resources lost beyond recovery. As the janitor spoke, the room seemed to shrink around them. The ordinary janitor, against the extraordinary being who had never known fear or hesitation, yet here, he was facing uncertainty and doubt for the first time in centuries. The alien billionaire's expression flickered between shock, disbelief, and grudging respect. Every point the human made gnawed at the confidence that had carried him across galaxies. He realized that for the first time, someone had seen through his ambition. Tension grew unbearable. The executives shifted uneasily, watching the standoff unfold between the janitor and their master. The floating contract pulsed as if sensing the drama. The very walls seemed to vibrate with expectation. The janitor raised his hand, pointing at the contract one final time. Never sign that contract. His voice echoed in every corner of the atrium and carried the weight of destiny. Across the room, the alien billionaire froze completely. Now, the room silent as he processed the warning. The janitor stood firm, ordinary yet extraordinary. For a fleeting moment the galaxy seemed to pause, awaiting the choice of one powerful being and the courage of one humble human. The alien billionaire sat frozen, his fingers hovering above the glowing signature pad, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. The room held its collective breath. Even the humming of machines seemed to quiet, as if acknowledging the standoff between the ordinary human and the most powerful being in the galaxy. The janitor stood, his posture firm, his eyes unwavering, his mop resting lightly against the floor. Yet every word he had spoken carried the weight of 10 billion lives. Executives whispered among themselves, voices low and uncertain, calculations forgotten. As they watched the unexpected confrontation unfold, the janitor began to move slowly through the atrium, his steps measured yet deliberate, weaving between floating screens and holographic displays, pointing to clauses and symbols that even the alien billionaire had overlooked for centuries. His voice calm and steady. Now, never sign that contract, he repeated, each word like a mantra, each syllable cutting through the tension like a blade. The alien billionaire leaned forward, studying the human, as if attempting to unravel a puzzle too complex for his alien mind. Yet with every explanation the truth became undeniable. Every hidden clause, every subtle trap revealed the potential for disaster beyond profit, loss, or even planetary politics. It was survival. It was life or death, and the janitor had seen it clearly. The executives watched in awe, some mouths opening and closing in disbelief at the audacity of a janitor instructing a billionaire in interstellar law and ethics. A cold silence settled over the room, broken only by the faint hum of hovering displays. The janitor moved closer to the signature pad, tracing a line of light across the contract, highlighting the clauses that would enslave colonies, destroy economies, and trigger wars. His voice low, yet piercing. These are the consequences if you sign now. These are the deaths and the destruction hidden in plain sight. You have the power to prevent it or to cause it, and the choice is yours. The alien billionaire's glowing eyes narrowed, his mind racing. He had conquered entire star systems, manipulated markets, toppled rivals, yet here was a human who had forced him into hesitation, who had shattered centuries of confidence with a single warning. The weight of his pride battled with the undeniable logic and the moral truth the janitor presented. The executives held their breath, unsure whether the billionaire would strike out in anger or heed the warning. Time seemed to stretch the room, a frozen moment suspended between ambition and reason. The janitor stood firm, ordinary, yet commanding, with a calm intensity that filled every corner of the hall. The floating contract pulsed faintly beneath his gaze, as if acknowledging the tension. The billionaire finally exhaled slowly, the first hint of doubt showing in his expression. The janitor had done more than warn. He had forced reflection, hesitation, and recognition that even the greatest power could falter before clarity and courage. And in that suspended silence, the fate of billions hung in balance. One ordinary human standing against the extraordinary, the janitor unwavering, and the alien billionaire frozen, for the first time in his life forced to question every assumption and every ambition he had ever known. The galaxy waited, and the janitor's warning echoed louder than any command. The alien billionaire remained frozen in his chair, his glowing eyes fixed on the janitor, as if the human had cast a spell. The room held an electric tension. Executives shuffled nervously, their calculations forgotten. The floating holographic contract pulsed faintly, casting eerie light across the faces of every being present. The janitor took a slow, deliberate step closer, his mop still resting lightly against the polished floor, his voice calm yet carrying the authority of truth. Never sign that contract, he repeated one final time, each word measured, deliberate, like a hammer striking an invisible anvil. The alien billionaire leaned back, studying every angle, every clause he had ignored for centuries, his mind racing to weigh ambition against the undeniable evidence of disaster. The room seemed to shrink around them, the ordinary human standing firm in the center against the most powerful being he had ever encountered. Critics whispered in alien tongues, their eyes darting between the janitor and their master. Some feared rebuke, some feared repercussions, yet no one dared interrupt the human whose insight had shattered their assumptions. The janitor pointed to a clause detailing hidden penalties, the scope of which could enslave colonies, drain resources, and spark interstellar wars. The alien billionaire's fingers twitched above the signature pad as he considered the implications for the first time in his long life of conquest. The janitor moved again, closer, tracing lines of alien symbols glowing faintly in the holographic display, explaining each risk, consequence, and hidden trap, his voice steady, unflinching, a rhythm of clarity in a room full of panic and uncertainty. Each sentence made the billionaire hesitate further, his pride battling the undeniable truth presented by a mere human. He realized that the warning was not only accurate, but essential, that the contract, if signed, would bring ruin and chaos beyond measure. Time seemed suspended as the alien billionaire's mind raced. The executives glanced at each other, their faces pale, knowing that the fate of countless systems rested on this moment. A janitor, ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in insight, had forced a titan of industry to question his own power. The hum of the machines seemed softer now, the room still, as though acknowledging that the ordinary had disrupted the extraordinary. Finally, the billionaire exhaled slowly, a luminous finger hovering above the pad, trembling slightly, his eyes never leaving the janitor. He made a motion that froze the hovering signature in midair. The room gasped, the floating contract shivered faintly. The janitor remained calm, his stance unwavering. He knew that the most dangerous moment had passed, yet the tension had not lifted. The alien billionaire still weighed the risk, his pride bruised, his mind racing with the rare sensation of uncertainty. Executives began to murmur, calculations, reassessing the deal. The janitor watched quietly, knowing his warning had been heard and that the first steps toward averting disaster had begun. Planets, colonies, and economies hung in delicate balance. Yet for the first time in centuries, one ordinary human had forced a pause, a chance to reconsider, and perhaps survive. The alien billionaire leaned back slowly, the signature withdrawn. For now, the room silent except for the faint hum of machines and the distant murmur of terrified yet hopeful executives. The janitor returned to the mop, resting it lightly against the floor, his eyes calm and steady. The ordinary man had stopped catastrophe with nothing but clarity, courage, and timing. The alien billionaire remained motionless in his chair, his glowing eyes fixed on the floating contract that pulsed faintly with alien symbols. He had spent decades mastering power, accumulating wealth, and bending entire star systems to his will. Yet here he sat, frozen, a mere human, had disrupted his calculation and forced doubt into his mind. The janitor stood firm in the center of the atrium, calm, steady, and unwavering, as if the weight of the galaxy rested on his shoulders, and perhaps it did. Executives whispered frantically, the numbers, the clauses, the hidden penalties, all re-examined under the scrutiny of a human insight that none had considered before. Some dared to glance at each other in disbelief, questioning if they had ever truly understood the document. The janitor moved closer, tracing a line of light across the holographic display, highlighting a clause buried beneath complex alien syntax that, if signed, would trigger the collapse of resource markets and enslave entire colonies. His voice low yet piercing, "These are the consequences," he said simply, "consequences the billionaire cannot ignore." For a long, tense moment the billionaire did nothing, only stared at the warning, weighing pride, ambition, and the undeniable truth before him. His hands hovered over the signature pad, trembling slightly, a sensation he had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. The room seemed to contract around them, the hum of machines fading into silence, as all waited for the decision that would decide the fate of countless lives. The janitor took a slow, deliberate step forward, his mop brushing lightly across the gleaming floor. A reminder of his ordinary place in the world, yet his words carried extraordinary power. Never sign that contract. He repeated each word like a mantra, like a warning, and the alien billionaire finally exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as the gravity of the human's warning became undeniable. He leaned back completely, withdrawing his fingers from the glowing pad. The holographic symbols flickered, and then dimmed. The signature was no longer active. The executives blinked in awe, the room silent except for the faint hum of power systems. The janitor remained calm, his posture unchanged, his eyes steady. He had done more than warn. He had stopped a disaster before it began. The alien billionaire studied the human for the first time, not as a subordinate, not as a curiosity, but as an equal in insight, as someone who had seen what he could not. His expression shifted slowly from disbelief to reluctant respect, a rare emotion in a being accustomed to certainty. He spoke finally, his voice deliberate, slow, acknowledging the warning that had saved him from catastrophic error. The contract remained unsigned. The floating pages dimmed, their threatening glow diminished. A wave of relief passed through the room, human and alien alike, realizing that the ordinary janitor had prevented what no one else could, a disaster that could have reshaped entire galaxies. The janitor simply nodded quietly, returning to his mop, resuming his work as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet those present knew that history had shifted in that moment. For the alien billionaire, it was a lesson: humility, insight, and respect for the smallest voice. For the janitor, it was another day sweeping floors, yet the galaxy had been spared because one ordinary human had spoken truth in the face of unimaginable power. The alien billionaire leaned back in his chair, still absorbing the reality that a human janitor had just forced him to cancel a contract worth trillions of credits. The floating holographic panels dimmed their threatening glow. The room seemed to exhale, but tension lingered like smoke across polished floors. Executives whispered, frantically recalculating potential losses and questioning their own assumptions. The janitor moved slowly, returning his mop to its place, his movements calm, deliberate, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Outside the glass walls of the atrium, the city sparkled under the alien sun, its towers gleaming in sharp light. Yet inside the skyscraper, time seemed suspended between disbelief and relief. Every being in the room felt the gravity of what had just occurred. The ordinary human had changed the course of interstellar business in a single warning, yet no one dared disturb the fragile balance by celebrating too loudly. The alien billionaire's expression shifted repeatedly from shock to reluctant admiration. He had faced adversaries who had plotted against him for centuries, yet none had forced hesitation like this one human, whose voice carried clarity, courage, and insight. The executives adjusted their posture carefully, pretending calm, while secretly reevaluating every deal, every calculation, every hidden clause they had overlooked for decades. The janitor's eyes swept the room quietly, noting reactions without pride or boastfulness. He knew his warning had been heard, the contract remained unsigned, and for now disaster had been averted. Yet he also understood that power often sought to forget lessons. The galaxy might never recognize the ordinary man who had saved it, yet in this moment he was content simply to return to his work. The alien billionaire finally spoke, his voice deliberate, slow, as if each word had been measured against the fate of colonies, entire economies, and political alliances. He acknowledged the janitor's insight in rare solemnity. The executives listened in awe, the most powerful being in the room admitting that he had been wrong and that a human had prevented a catastrophic outcome. The janitor nodded lightly, accepting no praise. He knew the world would move on, oblivious, yet he had done his duty. Throughout the day the room buzzed with controlled chaos. Computers recalibrated, reports were rewritten, and meetings rescheduled. The executives moved with careful precision as the janitor continued, sweeping quietly through the hall. The tension lingered because even though the immediate threat had passed, the implications of the warning rippled through every plan, every deal, every scheme. The empire of commerce could not fully forget that one human had changed the outcome. Outside the atrium, other employees glanced at the floating contract, its glow now dull as if defeated. They whispered rumors of what had occurred, yet no one approached the janitor. He remained apart, ordinary yet extraordinary, in the way only one who had seen disaster and averted it could be. Calm and quiet, he moved like a shadow among the powerful, reminding the room that insight, courage, and clarity were not measured by wealth or status, but by the willingness to speak truth even when all seemed ordinary. As the sun set across the city, the janitor finished his rounds. The alien billionaire watched him from afar, a rare smile flickering across his face, acknowledgement of a debt he would never admit aloud. The world outside remained unaware that one simple human voice had halted a catastrophe, and that even the mightiest could be humbled by courage, clarity, and honesty. Days passed after the contract had been withdrawn, yet the tension in the corporate spire did not fade. It simmered. Beneath polished floors and glowing panels, executives moved carefully, avoiding eye contact with one another, as if the janitor's warning had altered the balance of power forever. The alien billionaire sat in his massive chair, observing quietly, his glowing eyes following every movement in the atrium. Every whispered calculation, every subtle shift in the floating holographic displays. The janitor continued his rounds, sweeping the vast polished floors, his mop gliding silently across the reflections of light, his presence unassuming, yet every step seemed to carry weight. The executives whispered when he passed, yet none dared approach him directly. His warnings had been taken seriously, but the truth remained that a human of his station wielded an influence no one could measure, but everyone felt the consequences of small decisions became battlegrounds. The janitor's observation of meetings quietly shaping outcomes without a single word. He noticed the clauses hidden in contracts, the obscure symbols on holographic panels, the numbers that added up to disaster. If ignored, he moved unobtrusively, nudging data slightly, aligning reports, subtly shifting the balance without drawing attention. The alien billionaire watched silently, noting how the ordinary human had gained an unspoken authority in a world of extraordinary wealth and power. Executives grew nervous as minor errors were corrected before they could escalate, as potential pitfalls vanished inexplicably from financial models, as risk assessments suddenly aligned with reality. No one knew who or what was responsible, yet some whispered rumors of the janitor whose quiet presence seemed to anticipate disaster and prevent it before the billionaire even realized he needed intervention. The alien billionaire began to test the janitor's insight, occasionally presenting subtle traps in contracts, complex clauses designed to confuse, yet each time the janitor noticed the danger and nudged reports into clarity, or left a folded note in a hidden data panel, signaling a critical oversight. The billionaire could not explain how the human always seemed to see the consequences he had overlooked. He felt admiration, tempered with disbelief, and an emerging trust that was rare and dangerous for someone of his power. Rumors spread through the ranks. Employees spoke in hushed tones of the janitor, who walked unnoticed, yet seemed to prevent catastrophe, a shadow of wisdom, whose actions had spared planets, markets, and alliances alike. Executives who once scoffed now adjusted their behavior, avoiding mistakes as if guided by an unseen hand. The alien billionaire studied these effects carefully, understanding that the ordinary had become indispensable without ever claiming authority. Weeks passed. The city outside the spire remained unaware that a human voice had saved trillions in assets and countless lives. The janitor returned to sweeping his floors, unacknowledged and unpraised, yet each subtle intervention created a ripple across the empire of commerce that could not be ignored. He had transformed ordinary observation into extraordinary influence, and even the most powerful being in the room recognized that courage, clarity, and insight need no title to command respect. The alien billionaire watched him one evening as he finished his rounds, a rare smile flickering across his face, acknowledgement without words, understanding without speech. The ordinary human had become the guardian of decisions, the subtle force that prevented disaster, the quiet sentinel whose vigilance kept the empire from collapsing one unnoticed action at a time. Weeks turned into months, and the alien billionaire had grown accustomed to the quiet influence of the janitor, yet the calm was fragile. A new contract appeared on the floating displays, one more complex than any before, interwoven with alien clauses and hidden penalties that could trigger not only financial collapse but the displacement of entire populations. The executives scrambled as panic spread across the room, their confidence shattered by the memory of past warnings. The janitor paused in the atrium, his eyes narrowing as he observed the glowing document. He moved silently closer, examining the floating holographic symbols, tracing lines that twisted like living serpents across the air. The implications unfolded before him, with every word revealing danger and devastation masked by complexity. The alien billionaire watched intently, his fingers hovering over the new contract, his pride warring with the gnawing doubt that the janitor would once again uncover what even he had missed. The room seemed to shrink around them, the ordinary human once again holding the balance between catastrophe and survival. The janitor spoke softly at first, highlighting the subtle traps, the hidden clauses, the numbers that spelled disaster, yet the executives leaned in, unable to ignore his calm authority. His voice rose as urgency increased, warning of consequences. Unseen consequences that could destroy worlds and topple alliances. The alien billionaire's glowing eyes narrowed his expression, a mixture of disbelief, admiration, and fear. He had underestimated the reach of one human insight. Once again machines hummed and panels flickered as tension filled the air. Every movement seemed amplified. The janitor traced lines of alien symbols on the display, showing the cascading effects that would follow if the contract were signed. He spoke of lost colonies, shattered markets, and lives destroyed, his words painting pictures more vivid than any simulation. Executives trembled under the weight of truth, while the billionaire's mind raced to weigh ambition against the undeniable logic presented by a human whose station in the world offered no protection, yet whose insight wielded power greater than Armis. The alien billionaire leaned back slowly, his hands hovering above the signature pad, his pride bruised yet cautious. He realized the gravity of the situation. This was no longer about profit or prestige, but survival of countless lives, and the janitor had become the unlikely arbiter of decisions no one else could see clearly. The ordinary stood extraordinary, and the empire of commerce had no choice but to heed the warning sweeping slowly back across the atrium. The janitor adjusted holographic notes and nudged reports, subtly, his eyes calm yet alert, every gesture precise, preventing disaster without fanfare, without recognition. The executives and billionaire alike could only watch in awe as the human dissected the contract clause by clause, revealing danger with quiet authority. The tension stretched taut across the room, as if a single misstep could undo everything. Finally, the alien billionaire withdrew his hand. The signature remained untouched, the contract cancelled or postponed for reconsideration. The executives exhaled a collective relief, yet the gravity lingered. The janitor had once again prevented catastrophe. He returned to his mop, quietly sweeping floors as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet the city outside and the empire of commerce within had been saved once more by the courage, clarity, and insight of one ordinary human standing against the extraordinary. The tension in the atrium had reached its peak. The alien billionaire sat rigid in his massive chair, his glowing eyes fixed on the human who moved quietly between holographic displays. The new contract pulsed with a dangerous light, every clause more devious than the last. The executives whispered frantically, scrambling to interpret symbols that twisted and shifted like living code. The janitor paused in the center of the room, his mop resting lightly against the floor, his eyes scanning each line, each number, each hidden trap. Never sign that contract, he said quietly at first, his voice carrying a calm authority that cut through the hum of machines and the whispered panic of executives. The alien billionaire leaned forward in his chair, a rare hesitation in his movements, fingers hovering over the signature pad. The room seemed suspended in time. The ordinary human had once again become the arbiter of countless lives and fortunes, and perhaps even entire colonies. The janitor moved slowly, tracing lines of alien symbols glowing faintly in the air. He highlighted clauses that could bankrupt entire star systems, enslave populations, and ignite conflicts that would spread across light years. His voice rose steadily, explaining the cascading consequences, each word deliberate, each gesture precise. He did not shout, he did not demand, he simply presented clarity and insight, and in the quiet power of reason, the executives and billionaire alike listened in awe. The alien billionaire's pride warred with his growing respect. He had faced rivals, spies, and entire fleets of mercenaries, and yet none had forced him to hesitate like this one human whose courage and clarity transcended rank and station. For the first time he realized that true power was not in conquest or wealth, but in understanding the consequences of action and the responsibility to prevent catastrophe. The janitor continued, moving between panels, nudging simulations and adjusting calculations subtly, his presence calm yet commanding. He had become a silent guardian, guiding decisions without claiming recognition. He pointed to the sections of the contract where disaster hid in plain sight, where ambition blinded logic, and where billions of lives hung in fragile balance. The alien billionaire leaned back slowly, withdrawing his hand. The signature remained untouched, the floating contract dimmed as if acknowledging defeat. Executives exhaled collectively, relief and awe. mingling in their whispers, yet none dared approach the janitor directly. He returned to sweeping quietly across the gleaming floor, unacknowledged, yet every step resonated with extraordinary influence. The alien billionaire watched him from his chair, a rare smile flickering across his face. Understanding without words the magnitude of what had occurred, the ordinary human had averted disaster again and again. Without fanfare, without reward, only insight, clarity, and courage. Outside the spire, the city gleamed, unaware that one janitor had altered the course of fortune and power. The galaxy might never know the quiet heroism of the human who spoke truth to authority, yet those present would remember the moment the ordinary stood extraordinary. The courage, clarity, and vigilance could outweigh power, wealth, and arrogance, and that sometimes the smallest voice carried the greatest weight. As the janitor finished his rounds, the sun set across the towering city. The alien billionaire remained silent, watching him move, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them, one of respect, understanding, and unspoken gratitude. The ordinary had triumphed over the extraordinary, the empire of commerce spared from disaster once more, by one human whose courage had changed everything.